Welcome to this video. Today, we're diving deep into the data to compare the global gold standard of metabolic health against a really fascinating, trending botanical challenger. You've probably seen these two locked in a fierce debate online. On one hand, you have Metformin, the rigorously tested, tried-and-true prescription drug. And on the other, Berberine, a natural plant extract that is absolutely taking the wellness world by storm. So let's cut through the noise and look at the clinical reality of how these two actually stack up.
Let's jump right into the big question, shall we? Is Berberine truly nature's metformin? Popular media definitely makes them sound identical, like they're the exact same thing, just born in different places. You know, one in a lab, one out in nature. But as we comb through the actual pharmacological data, we uncover a much more complex landscape. What's super fascinating is that, sure, they share some amazing cellular targets, but they behave very differently in the body and are held to completely different regulatory standards. To really grasp this, we've got to zoom all the way into the cellular level. The whole foundation of their comparison lies deep inside the cell, specifically in the mitochondria, the powerhouses of our cells. And what I found absolutely fascinating here is that both of these compounds function as mild mitochondrial stressors. They target and inhibit something called complex I. Now, by doing this, they gently suppress the cell's ability to synthesize energy, or ATP. Essentially, both metformin and berberine are intentionally creating this controlled, mild energy crisis right there in the cell. And it's this exact shared stressor event that kicks off a whole cascade of amazing metabolic benefits. Think of it this way. This mild mitochondrial stress basically signals the cell, hey, our energy reserves are dipping. And that triggers the activation of a critical enzyme called AMPK. Now, you can think of AMPK as the body's ultimate metabolic master switch. This is it. This is the critical shared pathway that unites these two compounds. Once it's activated, AMPK tells the body to immediately stop consuming energy to build things. So it downregulates fat storage and tells the liver to stop pumping out so much glucose. Simultaneously, it cranks up pathways that generate energy, like burning fatty acids and pulling glucose straight out of the blood. This right here is the absolute core reason berberine gets compared to metformin. They both flip this exact same master switch.
But, and this is a big but, this is exactly where the comparison starts to break down. Because while they share that initial AMPK pathway, metformin belongs to a class of synthetic drugs called biguanides. It acts really heavily on liver pathways to reduce that glucose production. Berberine, on the flip side, is a natural alkaloid, and rather than homing in primarily on the liver, it acts as what researchers call a broad pleiotropic modulator. Okay, that's just a really fancy scientific way of saying it acts on a bunch of different networks across your entire body all at once, from your gut microbiome to your blood vessels to your fat cells. So they might start at the exact same switch, but man, they wire the house completely differently.
Section 1. Diverging paths, blood sugar versus lipids. Now, what's incredibly interesting is how these unique secondary mechanisms branch out to create vastly different outcomes, starting with blood sugar. When we're talking strictly about glycemic control, the data is just compelling. In head-to-head 13-week trials involving patients with newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes, berberine yields highly comparable, significant reductions right alongside metformin. Both compounds successfully drove down HbA1c, which is your long-term blood sugar marker. They both significantly lowered fasting blood glucose, and they both successfully managed those pesky after-meal spikes. Honestly, if we were just looking at the numbers on a blood glucose monitor, you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference between the patient taking the prescription drug and the one taking the botanical extract.
But how berberine actually achieves this glucose control is quite unique. Beyond just activating that AMPK switch, it does this through multi-organ remodeling. For example, it acts directly in the gut to inhibit an enzyme called alpha-glucoside. This actually delays carbohydrate digestion, reducing how much sugar your intestines absorb in the first place. It also inhibits DPP-4, which helps stabilize incretin hormones like GLP-1. And by stabilizing GLP-1, berberine enhances your body's own natural glucose-dependent insulin secretion. So it's essentially working from the gut outward to keep everything incredibly steady.
However, these paths diverge sharply when we start looking at lipid management. This is where berberine really pulls ahead. While metformin is fantastic for blood sugar, its effects on your lipid profile are, well, actually quite modest. Berberine, conversely, significantly outshines metformin here. A comprehensive meta-analysis shows berberine driving substantial reductions in triglycerides, dropping them by roughly 0.367 millimoles per liter. It also significantly lowers LDL, that's the bad cholesterol, and your total cholesterol. In animal models of metabolic disease, berberine consistently proves superior to metformin for reducing hyperlipidemia and obesity. It's kind of a surprising twist, right? Where the natural supplement actually beats out the pharmaceutical drug. And looking down at the molecular level perfectly explains why berberine is just so effective here. It's targeting things that metformin simply misses. For instance, it uniquely stabilizes hepatic LDL receptors by inhibiting something called PCSK9. What that does is basically help your liver pull way more bad cholesterol right out of your bloodstream, and also downregulates a transcription factor called PPAR gamma. Essentially, it's literally telling your body at the genetic level to stop stockpiling fat. Just an incredible mechanism of action for a botanical extract.
Section 2. Managing PCOS and hormones.
Let's look at a very specific clinical application where this difference really matters: Polycystic Ovary Syndrome, or PCOS. For patients managing this real-world condition, it can be incredibly challenging, largely because underlying insulin resistance often drives the symptoms. But head-to-head trials show that berberine's broader metabolic effects offer some really unique, powerful benefits over metformin. Specifically, berberine demonstrated a greater reduction in waist-to-hip ratio, meaning it's improving body composition more effectively. It also significantly decreased the free androgen index, lowering those excess male hormones, while simultaneously elevating sex hormone-binding globulin, or SHBG. So for a PCOS patient who is highly focused on lipid management and body composition, berberine presents a very, very compelling profile.
But it's important to note that both are highly effective in one absolutely critical area: rescuing the ovarian microenvironment. By reactivating that AMPK switch we talked about earlier, specifically in the ovarian theca cells, both agents directly reduce excess androgen synthesis and support significantly improved ovulation rates. It really goes to show just how powerful targeted cellular therapy can be for restoring hormonal health and fertility.
Section 3. The reality check: safety, interactions, and purity.
Now, despite all those impressive clinical mechanisms, we really have to pause for a hard reality check. We absolutely must contrast the pristine, globally standardized evidence base of prescription metformin against the basically unregulated Wild West of berberine supplements. Metformin has decades of massive long-term safety studies involving tens of thousands of patients. Its manufacturing is totally standardized, and its absorption into the body is highly predictable. Berberine, on the other hand, being a dietary supplement, suffers from highly variable purity between different commercial brands. On top of that, standard berberine has notoriously poor pharmacokinetics. That means it has very low bioavailability, and it really struggles to be absorbed effectively through the intestinal wall.
Because both of these compounds are so incredibly powerful, a really common question pops up. Can you just take them together? Well, as both pharmacy notes, berberine can be taken with metformin, but only under careful medical supervision. Why? Well, because they have overlapping glucose-lowering mechanisms. Combining them without professional monitoring risks a severe, unpredictable drop in blood glucose. Plus, let's be real, both of these agents are notorious for causing significant gastrointestinal distress. Combining them risks severe additive GI side effects that can be, well, let's just say, incredibly uncomfortable.
Furthermore, berberine strongly interacts with major metabolic pathways in the liver and gut, including things like the CYP3A4 enzyme and P-glycoprotein. And this is a massive deal, because it means berberine can dangerously increase the systemic exposure of many commonly prescribed medications. If you take certain statins for your cholesterol or immunosuppressants like cyclosporin, adding berberine can drastically alter how your body clears those drugs, leading to potential toxicity. This is exactly why treating berberine like some harmless over-the-counter vitamin is a huge mistake. It acts like a drug in the body, and it interacts like a drug.
Section 4. A synergistic future for NAFLD.
So the crucial point here is understanding what happens when we leverage this power intentionally and carefully. In conditions like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, co-administration actually creates a powerful synergy. The research shows that combining them under medical supervision hyperactivates that AMPK pathway, which sets off a chain reaction inhibiting fat-creating regulators like SREBP1 and FASN. The ultimate result? It can completely halt de novo lipogenesis, meaning it literally stops the liver from creating new fat altogether. It significantly reduces liver fat accumulation, offering a potent multimodal approach to a disease that currently has very few treatment options.
As we wrap up this video, the pharmacological data really paints a clear picture. Berberine isn't just nature's metformin. It's a uniquely powerful, multi-system modulator that really shines in lipid control and body composition. Meanwhile, metformin remains the undisputed king of highly predictable, rigorously safe blood sugar management. But it leaves us with an exciting thought to ponder. As delivery systems for berberine improve to solve those tricky absorption issues,
Could the ultimate protocol of the future involve not choosing between them, but carefully integrating the complex networks of nature with modern synthetic precision? Could that be the next true breakthrough in metabolic health?